This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. The light was draining from the sky, pooling violet and bruised orange behind the jagged teeth of the western peaks when Silas registered the movement. Across the immense gulf of the valley, a lone figure stood silhouetted against the fading glow, arms oscillating. He shouldn't have been seeing anyone. Not here, adrift in this ocean of Douglas fir and silence. Not with October chilling the air. His GPS had sputtered its last coordinates hours ago. Boy 3 to 17 and 122 to Quibity, a meaningless cipher designating the heart of Oregon's nowhere, 30 punishing miles from the nearest hamlet. Service was a ghost, a rumor. Only Silas, the weight of his pack, and now, inexplicably, this distant semaphore. 3 solitary days he'd walked, commencing from the Umpqua National Forest trailhead, Monday dawn. Now, Wednesday dusk approached. Sustenance remained for perhaps 4 more rotations of the earth. 40 degrees Fahrenheit would claim the nights. His gear was standard, reliable. Shelter, warmth, filtration, mending kit, map, compass, the essentials for wrestling survival from the indifferent wilderness. The stranger occupied a ridge, perhaps half a mile distant, a dark smudge against the bruised sky. Jacket, pack, a suggestion of headwear, details dissolved in the gloaming. Yet the waving was undeniable, insistent. Both arms, a frantic, symmetrical pumping overhead, the universal signal for distress. A knot formed low in Silas's gut. Trail protocol demanded investigation, aid, but instinct, sharp and cold, whispered caution. The muscles in his neck went taut. A clammy dampness bloomed on his palms, despite the evening chill. The figure waved on, relentless, the same arc, the same tempo, like a macabre clockwork automaton. "Hello," the cry ripped from Silas's throat, swallowed by the vastness, echoing back faintly. Silence answered, save for the ceaseless gesticulation. Prudence dictated making camp, letting the mystery wait for morning's clarity. Yet, the image of someone injured, hypothermic. The guilt would be a heavier burden than his pack. His watch face glowed. 6:47 p.m. 30 minutes perhaps of functional twilight remained. The figure stood higher, a steep 500-foot scramble. 20 minutes, pushing hard. "Coming," he hollered, the words feeling thin and inadequate. No acknowledgement, just the unwavering, metronomic wave. He cinched his pack straps, turned, and attacked the ascent. The path, a poorly defined ribbon, switchbacked aggressively up the ridge face. Loose scree shifted and skidded underfoot, a treacherous carpet. His boots fought for purchase. Sweat wicked through his thermal layer, a paradox in the biting air. Breath tore raggedly from his lungs. Above, the figure remained rooted, waving, waving, arms ascending, descending, up, down, a ghastly persistence. 7:02 p.m. He crested the ridge, lungs burning, heart hammering. Empty space greeted him, just wind-scoured rock, stunted manzanita, and the trail meandering onward before plunging steeply down the far side. "Hello?" His voice cracked, hoarse. Nothing. Light bled rapidly now. long skeletal shadows clawing across the valley floor. The temperature plummeted. He fumbled for his headlamp, its beam cutting a nervous swathe through the deepening gloom. And there it was, centered precisely on the trail, solitary, stark, a hiking boot, men's size 11, Merle, sturdy, almost pristine, just the one, placed with an unnerving deliberation, an offering or a marker. Silas stooped, picked it up, laced tight, dry inside, devoid of scuff or stain, innocent of the miles. No hint of struggle, no blood, an object utterly incongruous. His hand began to tremble. The boot felt alien, too perfect, too light. He dropped it as if burned, recoiling. The sun winked out. Darkness surged into the valley, an inky tide. The cold intensified, biting deep. His headlamp beam seemed feeble, a fragile defense against the encroaching obsidian wall. Shelter became imperative. He remembered a flat patch below, nestled amongst pines, maybe 10 minutes back down the treacherous slope. The abandoned boot sat there, a silent sentinel, mocking him. He turned, breaking into a stumbling, careful trot downhill. The headlamp beam danced crazily, animating shadows into fleeting grotesques. Every twig snap, every dislodged pebble sent jolts through his system. By 7:23 p.m., he reached the clearing, a small haven buffered by pines. Tent erection became a frantic ritual, fingers clumsy with adrenaline and cold. Poles clicked, fabric rustled, the rainfly was secured. Safe, or seemingly so. Inside the thin nylon shell, he retrieved his emergency radio. A futile gesture, he knew. Static hissed back, an empty chorus across all frequencies. He forced down a dense energy bar, sipped water, tried imposing logic onto the illogical. A prank, wayward youths. But the sheer remoteness argued against it. And that waving, that mechanical, tireless motion. Sleep was a banished luxury. Silas sat rigid, back braced against his pack, knife clutched in a white-knuckled grip. The tent walls felt terrifyingly permeable. Wind sighed through the pines, mimicking whispers, footsteps. Then, at 2:17 a.m., it wasn't the wind. Slow, deliberate steps crunched on the gravel outside, approaching from the ridge, closer, stopping just beyond the fabric. Silas held his breath, the knife blade slick in his sweaty palm. The footfalls began a slow circumnavigation of the tent. Once, twice, 3 times. Unwavering rhythm, measured pressure, like a slow, inexorable drumbeat. Then silence, settling directly before the zippered door. A shadow loomed against the nylon, tall and still. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The shadow remained, utterly motionless, a sentinel of dread. First light, pale and tentative at 5:46 a.m., dissolved the shadow. He waited another 30 minutes, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, before cautiously unzipping the door. The clearing was undisturbed. No impressions marred the damp earth. No sign, except, placed neatly, precisely where the shadow had stood, was the other boot, the left one, a perfect match. He broke camp with ferocious speed, breakfast forgotten. Gear was crammed haphazardly into the pack. He marched fast, sticking to the main trail, aiming for the distant promise of the ranger station 18 miles hence. The day dawned crisp and achingly clear, sun glinting, birdsong echoing with jarring normalcy. But the previous night's climb and the sleepless vigil had taken their toll. His legs felt leaden. Hourly rest became necessary. With each pause, his eyes scanned the surrounding ridges, searching, dreading the sight of that oscillating wave. At 2:30 p.m., he heard it. Footsteps behind him, the same cadence as the night visitor. Steady, unhurried, gaining. Panic flared. Silas ran, pack slamming against his spine, lungs searing. He plunged down the trail. The footsteps matched his pace, never faltering, never rushing. That implacable, mechanical rhythm pursued him. He ran until his legs buckled, collapsing beside the trail in a gasping heap. The footsteps ceased, directly behind him. He forced himself to turn. The trail stretched empty through the sun-dappled trees, but resting innocuously on a flat rock lay a folded piece of plain white paper, typed 4 stark words: "Thank you for coming." He stumbled into the ranger station as the sun kissed the horizon, spilling his fragmented, terrifying story. They mounted a search, found nothing. No boots, no note, no trace of another soul having trod that path. He scoured missing persons reports, contacted search and rescue networks. Silence. The coordinates yielded nothing on satellite imagery, but untamed wilderness. 3 months have passed. Silas hasn't set foot on a trail since. His gear, symbols of a life now irrevocably altered, is mostly sold, but the note remains, secreted in a desk drawer. Sometimes in the deep quiet of the night, he retrieves it, stares at the 4 words. The paper yellows. The typewritten letters seem to fade, ghost-like. Last week, a parcel arrived. No return address. Inside, a pair of hiking boots, men's size, 11, Merrill brand, barely used. Tucked within was another note, identical type. Ready for another hike. He burned the boots, fled his apartment for another, changed his number. Yesterday, driving home, a glance in the rearview mirror froze his blood. A figure standing roadside, far behind, waving. Both arms, that same horrifyingly precise motion. Up, down, up, down. He didn't slow, didn't look again, just drove, locked his doors, the echo of the gesture burning behind his eyes. He knows, with chilling certainty, what awaits. Tonight, tomorrow, perhaps next week, the footsteps will return. That perfect, steady cadence, drawing nearer. This time, running is futile. Now, he understands the waving figure, not a plea for rescue, a greeting, an invitation. It knew something he hadn't grasped on that ridge. Once you answer its call, once it fixes its attention upon you, there is no retreat. You become assimilated, another watcher on a distant ridge, another pair of boots left as bait on an empty trail. Silas writes this now, a final testament, a warning. If you hike alone and perceive a distant wave, resist the urge to investigate. Do not offer aid. Turn, flee that place, run without looking back, because proximity reveals the void, and by then, escape is impossible. The sun sinks low outside his window. The street below is deserted, save for one immobile figure, arms raised, waving. The footsteps have begun. Same rhythm, ascending the stairs, closer, down the hall, outside his door. There's no more time. It's here. Remember this, and if the wilderness calls to you with a waving hand, run. Anticipation, a bright current beneath her skin, carried Alara through the Athenaeum's threshold. Its exterior, a chronicle etched in weathered stone, culminated in an entrance arch whose fissures spiderwebbed like old scars. Tales gleaned from a dog-eared travelogue painted it a clandestine jewel, repository of texts whispered about but seldom seen. She had arrived in the heart of the afternoon, eager to lose herself in its rumored depths, envisioning dust motes dancing in tranquil shafts of light, the quiet company of ancient shelves. True fear had no place in that picture, yet within those walls it awaited her. A current of unexpected chill snaked along the entrance hall the moment she stepped inside. To her left sat the reception desk, initially untenanted. "Greetings," Alara called out, her voice swallowed and returned strangely hollow by the vaulted space. A rustle, faint as shedding paper, betrayed movement behind the imposing desk before an elderly man surfaced. Thick spectacles magnified his weary eyes. His shirt bore the geography of countless wrinkles. His gaze held a distinct glaze of annoyance, the look of a man whose solitude was rarely breached. "Could he assist?" he inquired, his tone flat. Alara explained her simple desire: to wander the archives. A shrug, minimal and dismissive, accompanied curt directions. "Third level, deepest corner, narrow passage." With a nod, she ventured further into the building's embrace. Soaring ceilings defined the corridor, punctuated by antique lamps sputtering a hesitant orange luminescence that stretched shadows into long, distorted figures upon the tiled floor. Her own footfalls tapped out a lonely rhythm against the pervasive quiet. The air hung thick with the scent of aged paper and a subtle, underlying musk of damp decay. She reached the grand staircase, dominating the central hall, its steps groaning under her weight. Her fingers traced the banister's smooth, cold curve. The second floor unfolded into a vast reading room, lined with shelves groaning under the weight of imposing volumes, some bound in tongues Alara couldn't decipher. Tables and chairs stood sentinel in the immense quiet, utterly vacant. An almost oppressive hush reigned, pierced only by the low thrum of unseen fixtures overhead. It was then she caught it, the first susurrus, delicate as an exhaled breath just behind her shoulder. She whirled, finding only empty air. A flutter kicked in her chest, quickly rationalized away. A draught, perhaps, or the eccentricities of antiquated wiring. Ascending to the third floor, she navigated according to the old custodian's terse instructions. The designated corridor stretched before her, long and steeped in gloom. Overhead bulbs flickered erratically as she passed beneath, casting a murky, unreliable light. Shelves marched along both walls, their spines announcing dates deep in the 19th century. Covers faded, peeling, whispering of neglect. The air here felt stagnant, heavy with dust that tickled Alara's nostrils. Her pace slowed, eyes scanning titles, a prickle of unease beginning to bloom. Her palms grew damp, her gaze flicked compulsively over her shoulder. Another whisper brushed past, this time to her left. A single, sharp syllable, unintelligible. She froze, straining to hear more. Seconds stretched into silence. Waiting, poised for a recurrence, she heard nothing further and pressed onward. Her thoughts raced, seeking mundane explanations. Ventilation shafts, unseen casements. Though the corridor offered no visible windows, feeling utterly sealed off. Brief explorations down intersecting aisles yielded only more emptiness. She eventually discovered a small reading alcove, a simple desk crowned by a green-shaded lamp, an old wooden chair, a scattering of books on local history. Here, she decided to pause. Setting her satchel down, she retrieved her notebook, intending to record titles, chasing references she hoped to unearth. The lamp emitted a soft, insistent buzz, the bulb crackling faintly. Disquiet lingered, a low hum beneath her focus. Her own breathing seemed amplified in the profound stillness. Suddenly, a flicker at the edge of her vision. Her head snapped up. Down the aisle, something had shifted behind a towering shelf. A swift, dark movement, like a shadow detaching itself. Rising, Alara walked deliberately toward the spot, peering between the rows. Nothing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Heat surged through her. Wiping a bead of sweat from her brow, she felt a constriction in her throat. A trick of the light, she told herself, forcing calm. Returning to the desk, her eyes fell upon the displayed books. Chronicles of the First Settlers, Forgotten Regional Customs. She selected one with a somber green binding. Its pages revealed faded illustrations, terse annotations concerning local legends. As she turned a leaf, scanning for intrigue, a distinct shuffle sounded directly behind her, the scuff of a footstep. Her heart leaped. Spinning around, she saw it. At the corridor's far end stood a figure, immobile as statue. The dim lighting obscured detail, revealing only a tall silhouette, strangely proportioned, its limbs seeming elongated, the head tilted unnervingly to one side, as if in contemplation of her. Adrenaline surged, tightening her chest, making her arms tingle. She swallowed, struggling for composure. "Hello?" The word emerged, frail, thin. The figure offered no response. She hazarded a single step toward it. An overhead light chose that instant to flicker violently. In the brief pulse of darkness and renewed light, the figure was gone. A profound, icy dread settled in her stomach. Her breathing grew shallow, ragged. A buzzing filled her ears. Moving to the spot where the entity had stood, she found only emptiness, yet the air there felt tangibly colder. She rubbed her arms, a tremor running through her. The sensation of being watched was intense, undeniable. Fragments of forgotten folklore surfaced, whispers of mutable beings, entities that mimicked human form, skinwalkers, tales she'd always dismissed. Now, confronted by this pervasive unease, dismissal felt like folly. She retreated to the reading desk, needing to collect herself. Packing her notebook away, she wrestled with conflicting impulses. Flee, her instincts screamed, yet curiosity, sharp and insistent, demanded answers. Was this delusion, or was something truly present? Taking a steady breath, she started down another row of shelves, her footsteps echoing unnervingly. She moved with deliberate slowness, scrutinizing each intersecting aisle. Occasionally, she thought she detected faint clicking sounds on the floor behind her, but each turn revealed nothing. At the corridor's terminus, she found a door fitted with a tarnished brass knob. It yielded with a low groan, opening into what appeared to be a storage space. Stacks of boxes loomed along the walls. A single, grimy window near the ceiling offered scant light. The smell was stale, damp. Stepping inside, hoping for some clue to the disturbances, she saw no sign of human presence. But near a cluster of crates, she noticed peculiar markings scratched into the floorboards. Not deep, but seemingly deliberate clusters of short, sharp grooves. A scraping sound from just outside the door, something brushing against the wall, sent a jolt through her. She extinguished her small flashlight, pressing her ear to the wooden panel, listening intently. Her breath hitched, her pulse hammered at her temples. No clear voice, just a faint, indeterminate shuffling. After a tense moment, she eased the door open a crack. The corridor beyond was plunged into deeper shadow, the lights dimmer than before, the hallway seeming to stretch, impossibly elongated. The main staircase was no longer visible. Stepping cautiously out, she scanned left and right, and there it was again. Halfway down the corridor to her right, the figure stood, head slightly bowed, arms hanging limply. Alara froze, sweat tracing cold paths down her back, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The figure's shoulders seemed to rise and fall in a parody of breathing. No eyes were visible in the gloom. A primal, prickling fear clawed at her insides. Retreating into the storage room felt like cornering herself. She chose left, toward the reading nook, hopefully toward the stairs, moving with excruciating slowness, her gaze locked on the static shape. It did not advance. It simply was. Then, a sound like a faint, drawn-out hiss reached her. Or perhaps it was only the frantic pulse drumming in her ears, filling them with static. As she neared the bend that would take her out of its line of sight, the figure twitched, bending forward in a sudden, horribly jerky motion. Panic seized her chest. She turned and ran. Not a frantic sprint, but a hurried flight, her footsteps slapping against the tiles, her breath escaping in painful gasps. Behind her, she heard it, a skittering, clicking noise, like claws scrabbling across the floor. Rounding the corner, she stumbled, catching herself against a shelf. Books tumbled, the sound echoing cavernously. A backward glance revealed nothing pursuing her. The corridor lay empty. Weak-kneed, she leaned against the shelf, steadying herself. From the direction she had fled, a faint whisper seemed to coil through the air, indistinct words that felt like a summons. Enough. She had to leave. This transcended mere curiosity. It felt malevolent. Whatever resided here, she could not contend with it. Heading for the staircase, she forced a semblance of calm, listening acutely, avoiding sudden movements. Each step on the wooden landing creaked ominously. Looking down, she saw the main floor, and relief washed over her as she spotted Mr. Silas at the front desk, bent over what looked like a ledger. She hurried down the stairs, nearly tripping in her haste. As she approached, she saw him writing meticulously with a fountain pen. His eyes flicked up, the same vexed expression returning. She ignored it. "Is anyone else here?" she blurted out. "I saw something on the third floor." He regarded her for a long moment, brow furrowed, then offered another negligible shrug. No one else had entered, he stated flatly. Just the two of them. Frustration warred with fear. She wanted to point to the evidence, the scratches, the spectral corridor, but words failed her. The library was vast, he murmured. Old pipes often made peculiar sounds. Her hand still shook. She was slick with a cold sweat. Stepping back from the desk, she scanned the main floor, half expecting the figure to materialize among the rows of silent tables. Everything appeared disarmingly normal. Lights buzzed overhead. Nothing seemed amiss. Should she go back? The thought sickened her. The prospect of facing that solitude, that presence, again. her gaze fixed on the tall entrance doors. A deep breath. One last check, she decided, knowing she might regret it, yet equally certain that unanswered questions would haunt her sleep. Turning back to the librarian, she asked if any other areas existed besides the main floors. He mumbled about a restricted section, subterranean, technically off limits, but likely unsecured, as no one ever ventured there. His prolonged stare was unnerving before he returned to his script. Dread coiled tighter in her chest, yet an inexplicable pull drew her toward this final possibility. Perhaps an answer lay below. Behind the main desk, a short passage led to a heavy door marked Staff Only. It swung inward readily, revealing concrete steps descending into shadow. A single, bare bulb cast a wan glow at the bottom. The walls were raw, unfinished stone. Gripping the cold iron railing, Alara descended cautiously. The air grew humid, thick with the smell of damp earth and a faint metallic tang. Somewhere, water dripped with slow insistence. The basement housed more archives, disordered shelves, sagging with newspapers and bundled documents, boxes piled haphazardly. She edged between two stacks into a cramped aisle, the ceiling so low she had to stoop. A flicker of movement snagged her peripheral vision, followed by a soft rustling. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stood utterly still, holding her breath. The rustling drew nearer, accompanied by a grating scrape against the concrete floor. Then, a large shadow slid across the wall directly before her, tall, distorted, with irregular projections around the head and shoulders. Sweat trickled down her temple. Nausea churned. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Attempting to retreat, her foot struck a box, sending it tumbling with a muffled thud. She clenched her teeth, bracing for an attack. Seconds passed in agonizing silence. Then, the shadow recoiled, sliding back the way it had come. The scraping sound diminished, fading into nothingness. That was the final straw. Turning, Alara scrambled back up the stairs, her legs unsteady, clinging to the railing with both hands. Bursting through the door onto the main floor felt like surfacing for air. Mr. Silas was gone. The front desk stood empty. No sound indicated his presence elsewhere. This new absence amplified her unease, but she didn't search for him. Her only objective was the exit. Outside, the late afternoon sun struck her face, a stark reminder of the tension knotting her body. Her shoulders ached, her jaw was sore from clenching. Glancing back at the Athenaeum, she half expected to see the figure framed in an upper window. Nothing stirred. The building projected an aura of placid antiquity, but placidity was far from Alara's state. Her hands refused to steady. The memory of whispers echoed internally. She walked away quickly, putting distance between herself and that place. On the relative normalcy of the sidewalk, she took several deep, shuddering breaths. Passers-by offered incurious glances, oblivious to the terror still vibrating within her. Her pulse began to slow, but her nerves remained frayed wires. She tried to piece it together. The whispers, the impossible figure, the scratches, the flickering lights, the basement shadow. Logic offered no purchase. Her mind cycled through futile explanations. Exhaustion warred with hypervigilance. Standing there, she briefly considered returning to find Mr. Silas, but the risk of another encounter was too great. Even standing near the entrance felt perilous. Her watch confirmed the day was waning. The library would soon close. Relief washed over her. The thought of being locked inside after dark was intolerable. Perhaps she would return someday, armed with more than curiosity, but she doubted it. Whatever lurked within the Athenaeum felt ancient, potent, and far beyond her comprehension or capacity to confront. She turned resolutely and walked down the street. With each step, the knots in her shoulders loosened fractionally. The further she walked, the easier it became to breathe. Yet she couldn't stop glancing back, her eyes searching the receding distance for a tall, distorted shape trailing her through the twilight. She never saw it, but the memory remained, sharp and indelible, a chilling certainty that something not quite human lingered in the quiet halls of the old library. Whether delusion or reality, the whispers and the visions were potent enough to ensure her absence for a long time to come. That initial click, the whir, the ejected square of film, a sequence culminating in an instant I knew marked a profound, dreadful error. Not the serene parlor I'd framed. No, the Polaroid birthed an aberration. This very room, yet ravaged, violated as if by some berserk force, with dark, viscous-looking splashes marring the damask wallpaper. A cold dread, sharp as ice, pierced me as the image resolved its ghastly details. This, I sensed with sickening certainty, was merely the overture to a symphony of horrors, a dissonance blurring the known lines of time, past, present, and a future rushing towards me like a phantom train. My name is Ilara. Supernatural notions held no currency with me. Spectral tales were campfire fodder, prophecies the stuff of pulp fiction. Or so I believed, until the day I unearthed that peculiar Polaroid camera in the upper reaches of the house I was tending. The Ashworths, its kindly elderly owners, were adrift on azure seas, celebrating 4 decades together, leaving their Victorian repository of curiosities in my care. Explore, they'd encouraged, and explore I did. The attic air hung thick with dust motes dancing in weak shafts of light, a labyrinth of shrouded furniture, trunks spilling sepia memories and forgotten garments, a time capsule, undisturbed, and there, perched incongruously on a dusty shelf amongst the detritus of decades, sat the camera, solid, unexpectedly weighty. Its vintage form seemed almost preserved against the slow decay surrounding it. Possessed by a whim, a simple curiosity to see if this relic held any life, I hefted it. Through the open attic hatch, the parlor below presented a perfect, still subject. I aimed, pressed, a mechanical groan, then the quiet expulsion of the film. I fanned it gently, an arcane ritual, watching the ghostly grays coalesce into form. Then the floor fell away beneath me. The parlor materialized, yes, but twisted into nightmare. Furniture flung askew, objets d'art shattered, volumes torn from shelves, and those stains, those awful, arterial dark stains. My breath hitched. Trembling, I scrambled down the narrow attic stairs, bursting into the living room, pristine, orderly, untouched. Sunlight streamed through immaculate windows onto polished wood. I glanced from the photograph, clutched in my white-knuckled hand, to the tranquil reality before me, my mind incapable of bridging the chasm between the two. Perhaps a trick of the light, a flaw in the ancient film. I needed another test. The kitchen became my next subject. Click, Whir. Eject. The developing image showed not gleaming chrome and tile, but inferno. Flames writhed up the gingham curtains. The stove buckled, a carcass of warped metal. Panic hammered against my ribs. Picture after picture I snapped, each a fresh descent into terror. The garden choked by grasping weeds under a bruised sky. The master suite, its bed a ruin of mold and sagging springs. The welcoming front porch reduced to splintered, decaying timbers. The true abyss opened when I turned the lens upon myself. A selfie, born of desperation. It showed Ilara, undeniably, yet decades seemed etched onto my face, hair shot through with silver, eyes hollowed by a fear I now felt blooming in my own chest. And behind me, oh God, behind me loomed a presence, ill-defined, tenebrous, one shadowy hand extending, reaching for my shoulder. The camera slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floorboards as I recoiled, hitting the wall hard. A prank? An elaborate, cruel hoax? No. Some deep, primal instinct screamed otherwise. This device wasn't flawed. It was cursed, offering glimpses not of memory, but of doom, a future steeped in shadow and decay. Hours bled away. I sat amidst the scattered terrible prophecies, the Polaroids like tarot cards dealt by a malevolent hand. Was this fate immutable? Or were these warnings opportunities to intervene? As twilight bled through the windows, painting the silent house in hues of bruised purple and gray, resolve hardened within me. If this was the future's script, I would attempt a rewrite. I owed it to the Ashworths, to the house, perhaps even to the terrified woman in the photograph. I began where the horror first manifested, the parlor. The image showed chaos, invasion. Therefore, security became my obsession. Windows latched and checked, doors double-bolted, hefty armchairs dragged to barricade entrances. Then, the kitchen. Every appliance unplugged, the gas line to the stove shut off. Buckets of water stationed like sentinels against the promised flames. Night became a blur of frantic activity. I hacked back overgrown shrubbery in the garden, inspected porch joists for the slightest hint of weakness. Dawn found me utterly spent, yet buoyed by a fragile sense of accomplishment. Surely, some thread of destiny had been rewoven. My hand shook as I retrieved the camera. One by one, I retook the photos, each developing square a suspended breath. Living room, kitchen, garden, myself. Horror washed back in, cold and absolute. The images were identical. The ransacked parlor, the burning kitchen, the decrepit porch, the haunted selfie. Unchanged. Despair threatened to engulf me. What power resided in foresight if prevention was impossible? I nearly hurled the cursed thing away, but then a flicker. In the new selfie, the shadowy figure remained, its posture menacing, but it stood fractionally further back. Its grasping hand hadn't quite reached my shoulder. Hope, tentative as a candle flame in a gale, rekindled. I hadn't averted the future, not entirely, but I had altered it. Minutely, perhaps, but altered nonetheless. Small shifts, accumulating. Maybe that was the path. The ensuing weeks saw me consumed. The camera became an extension of my sight, its visions, my unwavering focus. Sleep became a luxury, meals forgotten. My existence narrowed to comparing fresh Polaroids against the originals, hunting for infinitesimal variations. My efforts spilled beyond the property line. Visions of neighborhood blight spurred me to organize cleanups, anonymously tip off municipal authorities about hazards, even persuade the Ashworth's neighbors about smoke alarms and security upgrades. Slowly, agonizingly, the photographs began to reflect my crusade. The depicted destruction lessened, the decay seemed less absolute. In my selfies, the spectral pursuer retreated, growing fainter, its reach less imminent. Yet, in fortifying against a phantom future, I dismantled my present. Friends' calls went unanswered. Time lost its rhythm. The house, once a temporary haven, transformed into a meticulously arranged fortress against fate. The spell broke only when Mrs. Ashworth's worried voice crackled over the phone line. They hadn't been able to reach me for days, alarmed by fragmented messages I'd left about securing the premises. Their cruise was truncated. They were returning imminently. Ice water flooded my veins. Explanation was impossible. They deemed me mad. Perhaps I was. A frenzy seized me. I had to erase my obsession, restore the house to its former serenity. Furniture slid back, transplanted bushes were hastily replanted, evidence hidden. All the while, compulsively, I snapped more photos, desperate for visual confirmation that my frantic reversal had worked. And then, one emerged. The parlor, immaculate, serene, precisely as I first found it. Relief surged, potent and dizzying, until my eyes snagged on a detail in the corner. A smudge? No. A shadow, deep within the photograph's composition, familiar, with one hand indistinctly outstretched. A gasp tore from my throat as I spun around. There, framed in the parlor doorway, solidifying from the very air it seemed, stood the figure from my photos. Sharper now, less ethereal, and in its extended hand, glinting dully, it held another Polaroid camera. As it lifted its device towards me, understanding struck with the force of a physical blow, cold and devastating. I wasn't seeing the future as inevitable event, but as self-fulfilling prophecy, an Ouroboros of fear. The shadow wasn't an external threat. It was me. The me I was rapidly becoming, consumed by this cycle. Flash, white oblivion. When my vision swam back into focus, the figure had vanished. On the polished floor where it stood lay a single, newly developed Polaroid. Hands numb, I stooped to retrieve it. The photo showed me Alara, right now, standing wild-eyed amidst the scattered pictures, clutching the cursed camera. My face was a canvas of dawning horror and comprehension, and behind me, almost lost in the background's dimness, lingered a shadowy figure holding a camera. Clarity, sharp and final. I knew the only way out, gathering every single photograph, every chilling testament to my descent. I carried them, along with the camera itself, back up the narrow stairs to the dusty attic. I placed the camera precisely where it had rested weeks before, nestled amongst the forgotten relics. As my fingers released the cold plastic, an immense pressure lifted from my chest, as if I had been holding my breath for weeks. The future's shape was unknown, and in that unknowing lay not terror, but liberation. Trying to map and control it had forged my own prison bars. The Ashworths arrived the following day to find their home undisturbed, the house sitter offering a weary but genuine smile. I spoke nothing of the camera, the visions, the spectral doppelganger. Some doors are best left unopened. some knowledge unshared. Occasionally, the memory surfaces, the weight of the camera, the chill of the photographs. I wonder if another unsuspecting soul will climb those attic stairs, if the cycle waits to ensnare another. But the thought is fleeting. The future unspools moment by moment, shaped by choices made in the here and now, living in dread of what might be almost turned me into my own ghost. True freedom, I learned, is accepting the ambiguity, breathing in the present. And if, sometimes, in the periphery of my vision, late at night, a familiar shadow seems to flicker, well, I simply acknowledge it with an inward nod and turn away. Some images are never meant to develop. Reflected fire, twin embers in the rearview glass. That glance sealed my ruin. Too late. The night had already swallowed him, swallowed us both, propelling my sedan down a ribbon of asphalt, dissolving into blackness. Monotony had ruled the preceding hours, a 6-hour pilgrimage from commerce back to hearth, a route etched into muscle memory. Rain, a ceaseless fulminating assault, turned the windscreen into a liquid veil. Fatigue coiled in my bones, a viscid exhaustion blurring thought, igniting a slow burn behind my eyelids. 50 miles, the signpost whispered, to the next island of light. Then him, a solitary spectre materializing from the deluge, thumb stark against the gloom. Headlights painted a fleeting portrait. Sodden pack, a face etched with a weariness mirroring my own. Prudence screamed caution. Every ingrained lesson shrieked danger. Yet the sheer wretchedness of the tableau, the figure dissolving in the downpour, stayed my foot. Was it the fog of exhaustion? A fool's gamble on cosmic balance? Whatever ghost possessed me, the car sighed to a halt on the shoulder. He loped to the passenger side as I stretched across, cracking the door against the storm's percussion. "Destination!" I shouted, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm. "Just yonder," he rasped, folding himself inside. "Obliged for the lift, friend. Vicious night." Settled, he offered a clearer view. Younger than the rain-streaked glimpse suggested. Late 20s, perhaps. Garments clung like a second skin. Dark hair slicked flat. But the eyes, pale crystals, unnervingly sharp, cutting through the dishevelment. "Elias," I offered, easing back into the sparse traffic. "Nearest town's 50 miles out. That work?" He inclined his head, the faintest curvature touching his lips. "Perfectly, Elias. I'm Silas." Silence descended, thick and expectant, punctuated only by the metronomic sweep of the wipers, the engine's low thrum. Peripheral awareness tracked Silas. He remained unnervingly still, gaze fixed on the unfolding road, that ghost of a smile unwavering. "So," I ventured, the quiet pressing in, "what has you braving this tempest on foot?" Silas turned his head. The chill wasn't just the damp air seeping in. It emanated from his stare, a sudden frost overlaying the crystal blue. My hands tightened reflexively on the wheel. "Oh, you know," his voice dropped, smooth as river stones. "Just navigating the path I'm on." A nod, inadequate, was all I could muster. The ensuing silence felt heavier, charged. My fingers twitched towards the radio, craving distraction. His hand shot out, clamping onto my wrist, a grip like cold steel. "I wouldn't, Elias," he murmured. "We have matters to discuss." Panic flared, a frantic bird beating against my ribs. I yanked, uselessly. "What is this?" My voice fractured. "Let go." "Drive," Silas commanded, the word absolute. "And attend closely." Mind reeling, I obeyed. How had mundane fatigue birthed this terror? What abyss had I stumbled into? "You're wondering," Silas mused, voice eerily calm, "about the why of it. Truth is, Elias, you weren't the first soul to offer me passage tonight. You might, however, prove the last." Ice traced its way down my spine. "Meaning," I whispered, dreading the answer. His grip eased fractionally, a predator testing its prey. "I've walked this ribbon of despair a long, long time, Elias, longer than your worst imaginings, and I've found your kind, the benevolent, the Samaritans, are cut from the same cloth." He leaned closer, breath ghosting my ear. "You bask in the glow of your good deeds, don't you? Rescuing the stray. It burnishes your self-image, allows that satisfying inner applause. See, I am decent." Protest died on my lips, choked by fear. "But I wonder," Silas breathed, "how decent you'd remain if you knew the truth, knew what became of the others who stopped." Others. The word hung in the air like poison gas. "Take the next right," Silas directed, gesturing towards an almost invisible track bleeding into the trees. Doubt warred with terror. Break, fight, flee. As if intercepting the thought, something hard, metallic, pressed into my side. "Unwise, Elias. This piece has been busy tonight. Let's not add to its tally." Hope disintegrated. Trembling, I wrenched the wheel, plunging us onto the rutted earth. Branches clawed at the windows, a skeletal embrace. Darkness pressed in, absolute, beyond the headlight beams. "Curious thing, Elias," Silas remarked, tone almost conversational. "Most, when they grasp the precipice thereon, they grovel, beg, barter, promise fortunes. Not you. You're contained." I swallowed against the dryness in my throat. "What do you want?" A chuckle, dry as dead leaves. "Want? An excellent query, Elias. Truly." We bumped and jolted through what felt like an age, mere minutes in reality. The track opened abruptly into a small clearing. "Stop here," Silas ordered. "Kill the engine. Leave the lights." My fingers fumbled with the ignition. Silence crashed down, amplifying the rain's soft tattoo on the roof. "Out!" Silas commanded softly. The door creaked open. Rain struck me, cold and immediate, plastering my shirt to my skin. Silas emerged, gun unwavering. Front of the car. I stumbled forward. The headlights carved a scene from Nightmare, an excavation in the mud, starkly rectangular, a freshly dug chasm, a grave. You grasp it now, I imagine, Silas said, joining me at the edge. Your road terminates here, Elias. My gaze locked on the void, mind refusing the reality. Surely, this was delusion, a fever dream born of exhaustion. But the chill rain, the sucking mud, the insistent pressure of steel against my spine, they screamed truth. Why? The word tore from my throat, raw. Silas paused, a flicker of something unreadable in the dim light. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, tinged with a strange melancholy. Because it falls to someone, Elias. Someone must expose kindness as the flimsy shield it is, demonstrate that every act of charity demands its pound of flesh. A push propelled me closer to the lip. My legs threatened to buckle. Final thoughts, Silas inquired. Eyes shut, images flooded in, faces loved, words unsaid, futures dissolving. Regret surged, sharp and bitter, then transmuted into a core of defiant anger. This was wrong, undeserved. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. Yes, I said, the steadiness of my own voice a surprise. I do. An eyebrow arched, a shadow of amusement. Proceed. I drew a ragged breath. I stopped because you needed help, not for cosmic points, not for self-congratulation, because you were stranded and I could offer shelter. If that paints me a fool in your narrative, then let it be so. But it doesn't negate kindness. It validates its necessity. For a beat, Silas merely stared. Then, almost imperceptibly, the gun lowered slightly. You actually believe that, he murmured, a note of genuine astonishment. I nodded, unable to speak. His gaze shifted from the hole to me, uncertainty clouding his features for the first time. Perhaps, he began, then shook his head sharply. No. Too far gone. The gun rose again. I closed my eyes, bracing for the void. No shot fractured the night. Instead, a dull thud. My eyes snapped open. Silas lay crumpled, the weapon glinting dully in the mud nearby. Above him stood a uniformed figure, taser extended. Sirens wailed, unseen vehicles converging, their flashing lights slicing the darkness into strobe-lit fragments. As they secured Silas, dragging him away like sodden cargo, an officer approached me. Sir, you unharmed? A numb nod. How did you... The officer offered a grim smile. Couple you gave a lift to earlier tonight flagged a dangerous hitcher matching his description. We've been on his trail. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a hollow space filled with the enormity of what almost was. My knees gave way, depositing me onto the muddy earth, awash in relief and the lingering tremors of terror. In the ensuing days, through sterile interviews and the mind's relentless replay, one conviction solidified. Despite the abyss I'd skirted, the impulse to stop hadn't been wrong, because if compassion faltered, if we barricaded ourselves against the stranger's plight, then the Silases of the world would inherit the darkness. That was an ending I refused to accept. How long have I wandered this bleached wilderness. Time unravels here. My throat feels scoured by the ceaseless inhalation of cold, sodden air. A layer of chill moisture adheres to my skin beneath my jacket. When I first deviated from the marked path, hours ago, an eternity, the woods possessed a deceptive stillness. I'd sought refuge in these mountains, a weekend pilgrimage to cleanse my mind after interminable months confined within city walls. The objective was elementary: attain the summit, absorb the panorama, return before dusk painted the peaks. Now, recognition is a forgotten luxury. The very architecture of the trees warps, their familiar forms dissolving within this pearlescent miasma. This whiteness, an omnipresent shroud, possesses a density I've never witnessed. It coils and eddies without any discernible current, a silent, swirling ocean. And the scent, subtle, elusive, reminiscent of air long imprisoned in a forgotten chest, yet it provokes a tightening in my gut, a flaring of the nostrils. My eyes sting. To remain stationary invites vertigo. The ground itself seems to list, a slow, nauseating rotation beneath my boots. I fix my gaze on a nearby tree trunk, a dark anchor in the void. Each step towards it is a surrender, my boots plunging into sodden leaf litter and yielding earth. A frantic drumbeat echoes against my ribs, coupled with an unshakable weight, a certainty that reality here is fundamentally skewed. Again, the compass, its needle pirouettes, a frantic dancer refusing direction. My GPS, its battery brimming when I departed the rented cabin nestled in the foothills, remains inert, a dark, unresponsive slab. Technology falters, bewildered or nullified within this strange domain. I find myself rattling the lifeless device, a low curse escaping my lips. Futile. Reaching the tree, I sag against its rough bark, gulping air, wrestling the panic clawing its way up my throat. Through the shifting veils of white, another form flickers into existence, a vague silhouette, perhaps 12 feet distant. I freeze, breath caught, heart hammering. No sound escapes me. I simply observe. The shape is elongated, gaunt, suggesting a figure stooped low. Its outline trembles, fragments, then dissolves back into the milky ether. Gone. I blink fiercely, questioning my own senses. Not the first time. These anthropomorphic suggestions coalesce and evaporate. Apparitions painted and erased by the fog's capricious whim. Never lingering long enough for certainty. Always vanishing, the instant focus sharpens. My legs are unreliable, trembling beneath me. I propel myself forward, driven by the desperate hope of clearer air ahead. Instead, after forcing a passage through grasping underbrush, I emerge before a small cabin, decrepit, constructed of weathered, silvered planks, its roofline bows with age. No map ever hinted at its existence, yet it stands now, an improbable sanctuary. The door groans open under my push. Inside, gloom prevails, light strained through dirt-filmed panes, the silence profound. My boots scrape across wooden floorboards, disturbing an aroma of mildew and decomposing textiles. A chair lies overturned. A table lists precariously in a corner. I lean against the wall, breath tearing raggedly, striving for composure. My fingertips are numb stones. The cabin offers a paradoxical solace, laced with deep unease. It feels fundamentally wrong. I shrug off my pack, inventory my water, sufficient for a night, with rationing. Wiping perspiration from my brow, I attempt to marshal my thoughts. Dawn, leaving the rental, the crisp anticipation of the trail, the city cacophony I'd fled, the suffocating apartment walls traded for mountain air. Regret now tastes bitter. My gaze falls upon a mirror affixed to the far wall, its frame splintered, the glass clouded with grime. Approaching, my reflection is indistinct, a mere silhouette against the murky depths. Tentatively, I lift a hand, wiping the surface with my sleeve. The image gains a fraction more clarity, and in that instant, a flicker, something pale, amorphous, drifting past the window. Behind me in the reflection, I spin around. Nothing. Only the dim, empty cabin. Turning back to the mirror, there is only my own face, wide-eyed with fright, staring back from the tarnished glass. On a narrow shelf, a clutch of papers lies curled and yellowed, journal entries perhaps, or field notes. Scattered words leap out. Fog, impossible readings, compass spinning, voices at night. A cold dread crystallizes within me, another soul ensnared. I riffle through them, the script devolving into frantic slants, ink blotched by haste or damp. No dates, no names, just disjointed observations, fragments of terror. No clue to an escape, if escape was ever achieved. A sound from outside penetrates the silence, a soft, pervasive hum. Not wind, the leaves remain unstirred, the branches still. It resonates more like a distant, droning chant. Pressing my ear to the wooden door, I listen. The sound waxes and wanes, a siren call from the white depths. My skin prickles. They want me back out there. I swallow, the memory of those fleeting shapes, vivid. They hadn't threatened, hadn't attacked. They merely persisted, just beyond reach, perpetually dissolving. As if their purpose is not assault, but attrition, to keep me wandering until the self dissolves entirely. Sliding down the wall, I draw my knees to my chest, concentrating on regulating my breath. A plan. Without instruments, perhaps the land itself holds the key. Follow the gradient downwards. Logically, that should lead towards the foothills, towards the rental, the car. I have sustenance bars, a flashlight, a whistle. The flashlight, blessedly, clicks on. I sweep its beam across the cabin. It illuminates the mirror again. For a heartbeat, movement within the glass, a phantom passing behind my reflected form. I scramble upright, whipping the light around the room. Only dust motes dancing in the beam, derelict furniture, aged wood. This place is a trap. The walls press inward. My breathing grows shallow. Gathering my pack, I step back through the groaning door. The mist enfolds me instantly, a damp, clinging embrace. The humming voices have receded, fainter now, yet no less insistent. I select a direction, aiming downslope, and move with deliberate care. Each step is a negotiation with the undergrowth clinging to my ankles. Wet leaves betray my footing. I steady myself against a low-hanging branch. The thudding in my ears drowns out the forest's silence. To my right, a shape manifests, tall, featureless, unnervingly still. My flashlight beam finds it. It disintegrates like smoke. I stumble backward, nearly fumbling the light. The chanting swells, directionless, everywhere at once. Onward. Minutes bleed into an indeterminate passage of time. The vapor adheres to my eyelashes, blurring the world. Nausea churns, dizziness returns. Sweat breaks out, followed by shivers, then more sweat. My ears pop. I shake my head, trying to clear the pressure. Still, I advance, step by laborious step. Tripping over a fallen log, I concede the need for rest. Blind progress is madness. My muscles burn with fatigue. Tilting my head back reveals no sky, only the infinite, suffocating white. Have I doubled back, lost the descent? The chanting ebbs, leaving a vacuum of silence. I feel myself sinking into it, a vast, indifferent emptiness. I bite down on my lip, the sharp tang of blood, a grounding pain. Fumbling in my pack, I retrieve the whistle. 2 sharp, piercing blasts. The sound is immediately muffled, absorbed by the fog, returning as a feeble, distorted echo. Silence answers. Closing my eyes, I try to reconstruct the map from memory. 2 hours from the main road to my rental. A clearly marked trail. Southeast should lead towards the river. But where is southeast in this spinning void? The compass remains useless, its needle still tracing frantic circles. The GPS still dead. My phone, devoid of signal, caught within this bubble of bewilderment. Then, footsteps, close behind. I pivot, heart seizing, flashlight beam slashing through swirling mist. Nothing visible, yet the feeling persists. Something ancient, vast, passing nearby. The hairs on my nape prickle. The journal pages, voices, impossible readings. Could this fog be unnatural? Sentient, perhaps? A phenomenon centuries old, patiently luring travelers from the path, condemning them to wander eternally in a labyrinth of panic? It doesn't kill. It simply keeps you. No, I refuse. Gritting my teeth, I force my legs into motion. The ground continues its slight downward pitch. I cling to that single clue. Keep moving, I whisper, my voice thin and reedy. Keep moving. Each footfall becomes a conscious act of will. Periodically, the peripheral apparitions flicker. Humanoid outlines, born and dying in the corners of my eyes. I resist the urge to look directly. They feed on attention, on fear. My flashlight beam weakens, dims. A constriction tightens around my throat. I quicken my pace, desperation lending strength. The mist thickens further, pressing against my eyeballs. The mirror image flashes in my mind, that fleeting shape behind me. Was it inside the cabin too? Is it inside me now? A sharp pain lances through my chest. I gasp, stumbling. The chanting returns louder now, resonating like a far-off choir intoning my name, beckoning me back, deeper into the white heart. My teeth chatter uncontrollably. Leave me alone. The shout is pathetic, swallowed instantly. The chanting persists, fracturing into sibilant whispers that seem to emanate from within my own skull. I flail, nearly dropping my pack, forcing myself onward. My palms are slick. The sickening certainty grows. I'm walking in circles. The cabin could be anywhere or nowhere. Time ceases to be linear. Then, a subtle shift, a potential thinning ahead. My heart leaps. It's almost imperceptible, but the absolute whiteness seems less opaque in one direction. I lurch towards it, crashing through a thicket, branches tearing at my jacket. My breath comes in ragged bursts. Step by agonizing step, the air clarifies, fractionally. I stumble onto a slope that feels known. This rock outcrop. Yes, I think I passed this earlier. Uncertainty remains, but hope flares, fierce and fragile. I consult the compass again. Still erratic, but the spin seems less manic. My phone. A faint electronic chirp. No signal, but power flickers. I exhale, a shuddering release, fighting the tremors in my limbs. The The chanting fades, receding, but not gone. A palpable weight lingers at my back. They haven't relinquished their claim. They merely permit this illusion of escape. 10 more minutes of determined walking, and I recognize a distinctive fallen pine, one I noted this morning. Relief washes over me, potent and dizzying, almost out. My head still throbs, but the vertigo has eased. I push towards the remembered direction of the trail. Behind me, a faint echo. My whistle? Blown by another? I don't turn. Finally, I burst free from the densest fog bank, collapsing near a lichen-covered boulder. Color floods back into the world, the vibrant green of moss, the rich brown of damp earth. The oppressive whiteness retreats, though spectral tendrils still writhe at the edges of my sight. Laughter and tears contend within me. My body is a symphony of aches. My clothes are plastered with cold sweat. I check my phone again. The battery icon holds steady, though weak. My watch compass needle quivers, attempting orientation. Not safe, not yet, but closer. I push myself upright, take a tentative step, and glance instinctively at the reflective crystal of my watch. My own face stares back, pale, haunted, and behind it, hovering at the periphery of the tiny mirrored world, something shifts, a nebulous outline drifting amongst the trees beyond. My breath catches. I snatch my arm away, heart pounding anew. The image in the watch is gone, but the knowledge remains. It is still with me. Even here, beyond the fog's suffocating embrace, its presence clings, a shadow lurking in reflections. It might follow me all the way back to the rental, back to the city, back into my life. Limping downhill, I cast constant glances over my shoulder, ears straining for the return of those whispers. I have broken from the core of the phenomenon, for now, but I feel its residue deep within my bones, an indelible stain. My compass will forever be suspect. Every mirror, every polished surface will hold a potential threat. The mist doesn't need to destroy. It only needs to be remembered. And I remember. I will always remember. That particular weave of woods snagged my gaze on a Friday afternoon, a time when the world exhales towards the weekend, and I, Elias, craved only stillness. My purpose was simple: find somewhere utterly remote, a place to untangle the knots in my head. I recall pulling up short at its perimeter, a dense embroidery of timber where the air itself seemed to hesitate. An undeniable magnetism emanated from within, a silent summons. The limbs of the trees were arthritic, gnarled knuckles clasped so tight they choked the view beyond a mere arm's length. Yet, it was precisely this impenetrable quality, this promise of profound isolation, far from any human scar upon the land, that drew my feet forward. My pickup, a familiar metal shell, felt suddenly alien parked on the meager gravel lip beside the asphalt ribbon. Backpack hoisted, I turned my back on the known and stepped onto the threshold. Beneath my boots, the earth yielded, a spongy compression of seasons past, leaf mold, shed needles, perpetual dampness. Above, a dry friction skidded through the canopy, branches grating against branches. Instinct flagged it as wind, but the air hung thick and motionless, heavy as unshed rain. I held my breath, scanning, listening. No chatter of squirrels, no punctuation of birdsong. The usual forest chorus was conspicuously absent. Only that deliberate, rasping sigh overhead disturbed the profound quiet. Wrestling through a veil of low-slung boughs, I discovered not a trail, but the ghost of passage, a subtle disturbance where something, sometime, had pressed through. Snapped twigs like broken bones and bruised foliage marked this faint artery leading deeper into the wood's heart. I advanced with caution, etching the return route in my mind's eye, reinforcing it by tying a crimson bandana, a jarring splash of color, to a sentinel branch near my entry point. Perhaps 15 minutes dissolved before I registered the premature twilight descending. Overhead, the canopy formed a suffocating roof, permitting only slivers of weary daylight to pierce the gloom. A chill permeated the air, raising gooseflesh despite the humidity. My vision strained, adapting to the deepening shadows, and phantoms danced at the edges of my sight. Fleeting shifts, suggestions of form melting into the tree trunks. Branches, I insisted silently, just branches swaying. Yet, a tremor of disquiet took root. Drawn onward by the promise of flatter ground glimpsed ahead, a potential haven for my small shelter, I pressed forward. Eventually, the trees relented slightly, revealing a small, circular, bald patch in the forest floor, barely adequate for a solitary tent. Immense, ramrod-straight trees, cloaked in umber moss, stood sentinel around its perimeter. The grass within was sparse, anemic. This, I decided, would be my anchor hold. No scattered remnants of past fires, no forgotten refuse. It felt virginal, perhaps untouched for years. My pack slid to the ground with a muffled thud. My shirt clung, damp with exertion, revealing the oppressive closeness of the air, as if this pocket of woods existed within a sealed bell jar. I paused, catching my breath, the frantic drummer of my pulse echoing in my ears, a strange tingling current singing along my arms. An attempt to dismiss it, a shake of the head, preceded the familiar ritual of making camp. The ground sheet unfurled, the small tent sprang into shape, a fragile dome of nylon against the towering verticals. I began assembling a crude circle of stones, a hearth against the encroaching dimness, though a flicker of doubt questioned its wisdom. Would fire banish the shadows or merely animate them? As my hands closed around a smooth, cool stone, a sound breathed against my ear, a susurrus, faint as moth wings, yet undeniably articulate, a voice. My head snapped around, eyes raking the surrounding trees. Empty space. Then it came again, this time seeming to emanate from my left, a low, sibilant stream of sound. It wasn't words I recognized, but possessed a strange, undulating cadence, a linguistic texture utterly alien, raising the fine hairs on my scalp. I scanned the silent bowls, searching for a source, a trick of wind carrying a distant conversation, but the sound felt intimate, woven among the very trunks that encircled me. I traced the perimeter of the clearing, peering into the dense undergrowth, half anticipating some hidden observer, a prankster. Nothing. The whispering ceased as abruptly as it began, leaving a vacuum of silence that pressed against my eardrums. I stood frozen, breath caught high in my chest, straining for any further sound. Only the heavy thud of my own heart answered. After moments stretched taut, the quiet held. Retreating to the small sanctuary of my tent, I unrolled the sleeping bag, arranging my meager defenses, flashlight, folding knife, water bottle, within immediate reach. I sat, forcing slow, deliberate breaths, attempting to quell the tremor in my hands. Just nerves, I told myself. The unease of a new, profoundly isolated place. 10 minutes simmered away before I ventured out again. The light, already thin, was beginning to fray at the edges. Evening bled into the woods. Firewood became imperative. I headed towards a fallen giant I'd noted earlier. Mid-stride, a prickling awareness crawled up my spine, the unmistakable sensation of being observed. I stopped, spun around. A flicker of motion at the edge of my vision. Something dark, vaguely man-shaped, gliding with unnerving fluidity behind the girth of an ancient oak. Hello? The word felt small, swallowed by the woods. Silence answered. Heart hammering against my ribs, I advanced towards the spot. The tree trunk stood impassive, guarding a cluster of shoulder-high ferns. I pushed them aside with a rustle. Nothing. The damp earth beneath, littered with twigs and debris, showed no imprint, no sign of recent passage. A cold wave of adrenaline washed through me, tightening my throat, quickening my breath. Abandoning a thorough search, I snatched brittle branches from the downed log, breaking them hastily, and beat a retreat to my camp, acutely aware of unseen eyes following my every step. The short distance back felt agonizingly long. Back in the relative safety of the clearing, I coaxed a fire to life. The lightest spark caught eagerly, nurturing a hesitant flame that I fed with twigs until it grew into a flickering pulse of orange. Its light painted the surrounding trees, making them loom even larger, their shadows stretching and contorting across the clearing floor. A knot tightened in my gut as I watched those shadows writhe. They seemed possessed of their own volition, independent of the fire's dawns. When the last vestiges of daylight surrendered, the darkness beyond the fire's small circumference became absolute, a solid wall of black. The rustling returned, no longer localized, but seeming to emanate from all points of the compass, sometimes near, sometimes distant whispers of movement in the leaf litter. My breathing grew shallow, ragged. A tremor took hold of my hands. Cold sweat beaded on my temples and traced paths down my face, defying the cooling night air. My flashlight beam became a nervous probe, sweeping the impenetrable tree line, seeking definition in the void. Later, perhaps 8 or 9 o'clock, time had become fluid. The whispers resurfaced. This time, they possessed a chilling clarity, a chorus of voices speaking in unison, weaving that same alien tongue into something that felt undeniably like a chant. The sounds were guttural, sharp-edged, yet possessed a hypnotic rhythm that resonated deep within my bones. My muscles locked, rigid. My mouth turned to dust. I tried to speak, the sound emerging as a pathetic croak. Who's there? Instant silence descended, profound and watchful. Then, minutes later, my eyes snagged on a silhouette standing just beyond the fire's reach. Humanoid, yet disturbingly wrong. Limbs too long, stretched thin, the head indistinct, featureless. It held its position for a heartbeat, 2, then dissolved back into the seamless dark between the trees. I scrambled upright, flashlight in one fist, knife clutched tight in the other. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. A hermit? Some lost soul dwelling in these depths. Part of me screamed to challenge it again, but terror clamped down hard, sealing my throat. I remained tethered to the fire, feeding it sticks obsessively, clinging to the illusion of its protective glow. My heart throbbed, a painful pressure constricting my chest. Nausea churned low in my belly, the acrid taste of fear rising in my throat. The memory of that figure, its silent, impossible movement, replayed relentlessly. Later, a low, mournful sound drifted through the trees. It mimicked the wind sighing through branches, yet carried an unnerving, almost human timbre. It rose, fell, then ebbed away into the pervasive silence. My mind spun, concocting frantic, inadequate explanations, none of which eased the electric tension humming through my body. Every snap of a twig sent involuntary jolts through my limbs. An ache settled deep in my shoulders and back, testimony to the unrelenting clench of fear. Clutching the flashlight like a weapon, I forced myself to make a brief reconnaissance beyond the fire's edge. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing subtle disturbances in the undergrowth, patches where the ground seemed oddly worn, ferns bent unnaturally, small branches freshly snapped. Then the light snagged on them, impressions in the damp earth, footprints, not large, but strangely narrow, elongated, suggesting a gait unlike anything human. My breath hitched. They led away from the clearing, deeper into the black unknown. Heart vaulting against my ribs, I retreated hastily to the dwindling fire, and saw it again, further to my right this time. It stepped deliberately from behind a thick trunk, one elongated arm lifting slowly, palm open, in a gesture that could only be interpreted as beckoning. Ice sluiced through my veins. My legs turned to water, yet some morbid curiosity, twinned with primal terror, pulled me a single step closer. The figure instantly recoiled, melting back into the shadows. Its retreat was accompanied by a soft, dry clicking, like pebbles being tapped together rhythmically. I swept the flashlight beam frantically towards the sound, but it illuminated only indifferent bark and dense curtains of leaves. Following that thing into the Stygian depths was unthinkable, yet staying felt like waiting in a trap. The prospect of navigating this lightless maze, stalked by whatever lurked within, seemed equally suicidal. Dawn. I had to wait for dawn. With a heavy heart, I smothered the fire, plunging the clearing into near total blackness, hoping obscurity offered more protection than the revealing flames. I scrambled back into the tent, leaving the zipper cracked just enough for a sliver of vision. Flashlight clutched, white-knuckled, knife resting heavy on my thigh. Inside the thin nylon shell, every muscle remained coiled steel. My skin felt damp and cold. The frantic pulse in my ears became the dominant sound, overlaid sporadically by the disembodied whispers or that dry, chitinous clicking, sometimes seeming distant, sometimes unnervingly close. Time warped, stretching minutes into aching eternities. My phone's glow confirmed only an hour had passed, though it felt like half the night. I focused on breathing, slow, deliberate counts, a desperate mantra against the rising tide of panic. At some point, the whispers coalesced directly outside the thin fabric wall, a single voice, now, engaged in a rhythmic chant. The sounds were harsh, guttural, alien syllables that seemed to vibrate not just in the air, but within my own skull. My vision momentarily blurred. A painful pressure built behind my eyes. My mouth was utterly devoid of moisture. In pure reflex, I thumbed the flashlight on, its beam splashing against the tent wall. The chanting sliced off mid-syllable. A flurry of rapid footsteps receded into the woods. Sleep, after that, was a lost cause. Raw exhaustion warred with hypervigilance. My mind refused to quieten. Every nocturnal rustle, every settling twig became an electric shock against frayed nerves. My limbs cramped, my neck stiffened. Later, much later, a shadow slid across the front of the tent, a fleeting darkness against the slightly less black night. It paused. That low, rhythmic clicking sounded again, disturbingly close, almost inquisitive. The shadow lingered for a long moment, then flowed away, leaving utter silence in its wake. When the first tentative hints of gray finally diluted the oppressive black, signaling dawn's reluctant arrival, I unzipped the tent with trembling fingers. Packing became a frantic, fumbling affair, my legs unsteady beneath me. Gear was stuffed haphazardly into the backpack, breakfast utterly forgotten in the desperate urge to flee. In the nascent light, the woods seemed marginally less threatening, yet the atmosphere remained heavy, suffocating. The silence persisted, thick and watchful, the sensation of unseen scrutiny undiminished. A faint ringing lingered in my ears, an echo of sustained tension. Locating my crimson bandana, a beacon in the gloom, I plunged back along the subtle track I'd followed inward, moving at the fastest pace, short of a panicked run. Twigs cracked like gunfire underfoot. Low branches seemed to reach out, snagging at my clothes as if attempting to hold me fast. My head constantly swiveled, scanning the trees behind me, half expecting pursuit. Once, maybe twice, I thought I caught the faintest echo of those whispers on the still air. My heart hammered a brutal rhythm against my ribs, and my pack felt like lead, my strained muscles screaming for respite. I refused to grant. The sight of the tree line thinning, resolving into the familiar edge of the woods where my truck waited, sent a wave of dizzying relief washing over me. Freedom. My hand shook so violently I fumbled the keys, dropping them onto the gravel shoulder. Finally, the door lock yielded. I hurled my pack onto the passenger seat, slammed the door, and twisted the ignition. The engine roared to life, a reassuringly mundane sound in the charged silence. My palms slicked the steering wheel with sweat. As I pulled away, a glance in the rearview mirror showed the forest entrance, a dark moor that seemed to actively repel the morning light, swallowing it whole. With every meter gained, the crushing weight on my chest eased, though the relief felt fragile, provisional. The whispers, the clicking, the chant, they echoed relentlessly in the echo chamber of my skull. The drive back was a blur, a state of light-headed hyper-awareness where every roadside shadow seemed poised to move. I carried the certainty of having brushed against something inexplicable, something ancient and profoundly other. The memory of that rhythmic chanting, those fleeting silhouettes in the deep woods, became a permanent resident in the quiet corners of my mind. I have never ventured back towards that particular stretch of wilderness, nor harbor any intention of ever doing so. Solitude still calls to me, but now I seek it in places mapped and trodden, campgrounds where the murmur of human voices and the flicker of neighboring fires offer a bulwark against the unknown. Better the familiar chorus of the known world than the profound, watchful silence of that dense timber and the alien cadences that still sometimes surface in the unguarded moments just before sleep. Initially, I attributed it to autumn gales sighing through the antiquated ductwork, but gales don't respire. They lack the ragged pause the strained cadence of a failing bellows gasping for purchase, and mere currents of air possess no knowledge of one's given name. October saw me installed in the farmhouse, seeking the quietude necessary for the novel demanding birth within me. Character filled with contemporary comforts, the letting agent had declared, a transparent gloss on intermittent electricity, and an internet connection just sturdy enough for rudimentary queries. Above ground, a veneer of modernity coated the aged timbers. Below, the cellar festered, untouched by the renovator's brush. 3 days after my arrival, the respiration commenced. It was nearing the 11th hour. I sat hunched over the skeletal outline of a chapter when I first perceived it, a feeble, gravelly resonance percolating up through the floorboards, a mere whisper against the rhythmic clatter of my keyboard, at first, but once isolated, impossible to dismiss. Its rhythm possessed a morbid clockwork, a shallow drawl, perhaps 3 seconds, a hiatus of 2, then a trembling expulsion that seemed to catch halfway, like fluid-filled lungs struggling for clearance. I rose, traversing the ground floor, pressing my ear against the cold metal of heating grates. The sound intensified, reaching its zenith near the cellar portal. Easing the door open, I stood poised at the stairhead, listening intently. Silence descended instantly, thick and absolute. A flick of the switch cast the stark, jaundiced light of a naked bulb across the subterranean space. Nothing stirred within its harsh glare. "Is anyone there?" My voice caromed off the damp stone walls, returning unanswered. I descended the groaning wooden treads, meticulously scanning each corner. Cardboard cartons from my relocation slumped in one quadrant. The washer and dryer huddled like silent sentinels against the far foundation wall. A cluster of garden implements, spades, a rusted fork, leaned nearby, but no errant fauna, no trespassing vagrants, nothing animate to account for the sound. I arbitrarily assigned blame to the eccentricities of aged plumbing and retreated upstairs. Yet the following night, punctual as some spectral appointment, the breathing resumed. This time, armed with a heavy flashlight, I descended without hesitation. Again, crossing the threshold into the stairwell, extinguished the sound. An hour I devoted to a forensic search of that lower level. Behind the stacks of boxes, beneath the skeletal structure of the stairs, circling the bulky water heater, I even ventured outside, torch beam probing the gloom around the foundations, seeking any burrow or den. Futile. This unsettling pattern solidified over 2 weeks. Nightly, sometime between the hours of 11 and 2, the pulmonary rhythm would surface. Its duration varied, sometimes stretching for hours if I consciously ignored it, other times lasting mere minutes. Always the identical, strenuous cadence, always ceasing the precise moment I initiated investigation. I began capturing its rasping signature on my phone's recorder, playing the unsettling audio for the local handyman tasked with the property's upkeep. He offered theories of mice nesting within the wall cavities, but mice lack such resonant lung capacity, such labored depth. The letting agent waved away my mounting unease with practiced indifference, murmuring platitudes about ancestral homes and their inherent symphony of creaks and groans. An HVAC specialist summoned at my insistence, performed a thorough inspection, and pronounced the heating system faultless. I attempted to work through the disturbance, to normalize it. By day, the farmhouse maintained a convincing facade of utter normalcy. In the clarity of sunlight, I could almost persuade myself it was a figment, a stress-induced auditory hallucination. But inevitably, as dusk bled across the landscape, a familiar dread would begin its slow coiling in my stomach. The cellar became forbidden territory. My laundry found its way to the coin-operated machines in the nearest town. Plug-in air fresheners bloomed throughout the house, their cloying chemical sweetness a futile barrier against the pervasive, musty odor that seemed to seep upwards through the floorboards with the fall of night. Last evening, the established horror shifted its shape. I was seated in my usual position, striving for narrative focus against the counterpoint of wet, rattling breaths emanating from below. The sound, though still deeply unsettling, had acquired a grim familiarity. Then it fractured. The respiration abruptly accelerated, grew ragged and irregular. Gone was the measured, struggling rhythm. In its place came swift, shallow pants, frantic and thin. My hands froze mid-keystroke. In the 3 weeks of my tenancy, the breathing's tempo had remained utterly immutable. Now this. A cold, prickling sensation traced my spine as the gasping intensified, swelling in volume, nearing a terrifying desperation. Then, complete cessation. The ensuing silence struck with the force of a physical blow. I sat perfectly still, straining to hear anything above the frantic thunder of my own pulse against my ribs. 1 second stretched, then 2, then 3, and then, insidious, subtle, a susurrus, so attenuated I almost failed to register it, seeming to drift upwards from the heating grate positioned beside my desk. Leo. My name. Just my name, articulated in a desiccated scraping tone, like emery cloth drawn across rough stone. My chair skidded backward as I scrambled violently to my feet. The whisper reiterated, gaining a fraction more substance. Leo, I can sense your warmth up there. I bolted for the front door, snatching my car keys from the hook as I passed. Behind me, a protracted groan signaled the cellar door swinging open of its own accord. The whisper transmuted, thickening into a moist chuckle that seemed to bubble up from the stairwell's unseen depths. Leo, aren't you curious to see? I wrenched the front door wide and plunged out into the night, clad only in socks. November's frigid air struck like a physical slap, but I didn't pause, didn't slow my frantic pace until I reached the perceived sanctuary of my car. My fingers fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice onto the cold gravel before finally engaging the lock. As I slid behind the wheel, a compelled glance shot back towards the house. The porch light cast the open front door in stark, accusing relief. Framed within that doorway, visible across the intervening space, stood the basement door, also wide open, presenting a rectangle of perfect, impenetrable blackness. And within that absolute dark, something stirred, commencing a slow, ponderous, dragging ascent of the cellar stairs. The engine caught with a roar. Gravel sprayed violently as I tore out of the driveway, tires spitting stones, seeking the refuge of the paved road. I drove without conscious destination until the neon glow of a roadside motel offered anonymous shelter. I secured a room with the credit card. I sit here now, transcribing this account while the details remain seared and vivid, as dawn paints the cheap curtains with indifferent light. Returning is an imperative. All my belongings remain within those walls. Crucially, my laptop, containing 3 months of painstaking work. Yet a chilling discovery binds me to this sterile motel room. Checking my phone after the initial wave of panic subsided, I found the voice memo application still active. Instinct, raw and unthinking, had prompted me to initiate recording when the breathing pattern first shifted, seeking some tangible proof against inevitable disbelief. I replayed the captured audio moments ago. The labored breaths are undeniably present, stark and clear. The subsequent frantic gasping, the abrupt halt, all faithfully documented. But my name, the whispers that followed, utterly absent from the recording. Following the cessation of breathing, the file contains only 3 minutes of profound, unbroken silence. This discrepancy defies explanation. I know what I heard, but if those sibilant, intimate words did not travel upwards through the heating vents, their origin must have been terrifyingly immediate, directly behind my chair. I have already contacted the letting agent, formally declaring my intention to terminate the lease immediately. Threats of legal action were voiced. They ring hollow against the resonance of my fear. Let them retain my security deposit. Let them pursue litigation for the remaining rent. No sum, no legal entanglement could compel me to spend another night beneath that roof. Yet, retrieval is unavoidable. One final foray, necessarily conducted under the full, revealing glare of daylight, to reclaim my essential effects. 10 minutes, I tell myself. Maximum. A surgical extraction. I will not approach the basement door. I will not even permit my gaze to linger upon it. Still, the image replays relentlessly. Those ponderous, dragging footfalls ascending from the darkness below. The horrifying realization that the whispers bypassed the ductwork entirely, originating mere inches away. What presence stood there, close enough to breathe its poisoned secrets directly into my ear while I sat frozen, oblivious, at my desk? Motel checkout is at 11 o'clock. Less than 2 hours remain to gather my courage, to attempt the impossible feat of convincing myself it was all imagined, to steel myself for re-entry into that violated space. Yet one certainty pervades the fear, cold and immutable. Whatever entity resides in that cellar anticipates my return. It comprehends the necessity of my retrieval mission, and this time its communication will surely transcend mere whispers. I sense it, an undeniable pressure even miles distant in this brightly lit anonymous room. The same awareness I felt burgeon night after night for the past 3 weeks. It possesses an ancient patience. It harbors an unnerving hunger, and it knows my name. Perhaps, after all, simply purchasing a new laptop is the wiser, safer course of action. Postscript. For those inquiring about the aftermath, yes, I did return to the farmhouse, though not unaccompanied. 2 trusted friends agreed to flank me. We ventured inside during the unambiguous brightness of midday. The basement door remained ajar, gaping precisely as I had abandoned it in my flight. Curiously, the house itself bore no trace of the pervasive subterranean fetor that had plagued my nights. It smelled only of dust, disuse, and lingering vacancy. Within 15 minutes, all my vital possessions were secured and loaded. None among us ventured near the basement threshold. Its dark invitation remained unanswered. I formally dissolved the lease agreement and retreated to the relative anonymity of the city. The letting agent's initial threats of legal recourse eventually dissipated, likely hastened by the fact that 3 subsequent tenants reportedly vacated the premises within weeks of moving in. The farmhouse, according to recent online listings, still lingers on the market, described now as a recently refurbished farmhouse with rustic charm, price significantly reduced for quick sale. Occasionally, late at night, when my city apartment falls into profound quietude, a phantom vigilance surfaces, my ears subconsciously straining for the faint echo of that distinctive, ragged respiration. Thus far, silence has prevailed, yet sometimes, drifting on the very edge of slumber, a specific memory surfaces with jarring clarity, jolting me bolt upright in bed, heart hammering against my ribs. A detail I neglected to consider in the initial terror. I never once divulged my forename to the letting agent. All our correspondence had been conducted via email, and every official document bears my signature as L. Vance. How, then, did the unseen presence dwelling in the depths of that cellar acquire the knowledge to whisper Leo? "3 days adrift in my late Uncle Declan's farmhouse, marooned on this wind-scoured isle, and the key surfaced, tucked deep within the cluttered bowels of his desk drawer, a forgotten reliquary of desiccated ink pens and papers brittle as autumn leaves, lay a small weight of brass, tarnished near black by time. Its ordinariness would have escaped me entirely were it not for the intricate knotwork, unmistakably Celtic, etched into its head. My fingers, already grimed from sifting through the sedimentary layers of a life accumulated, closed around it. This inheritance, this stone husk of a house in County Clare, had arrived like an unexpected squall. Uncle Declan, a phantom figure from childhood, recalled only as a dense beard and the ghost of pipe smoke. Now, 35, cast off by Eleanor and adrift financially and emotionally, I was the improbable custodian of this crumbling legacy, a place untouched, it seemed, since the world was younger. The farmhouse sighed under neglect. Rainwater wept through shingles in triplicate. Pipes groaned like tormented souls, and dust lay thick as funeral shrouds. Yet it was sanctuary. After Eleanor's departure, stripping away savings and self-worth alike, this neglected fragment of ancestry felt like the last shore available. Day 4 delivered the next revelation. The trapdoor, concealed beneath a threadbare rug in what must have served as Declan's study, a cramped chamber hemmed by bookshelves bowing under forgotten lore. Its tarnished brass ring pull echoed the key's patina. The key itself, gritty against the lock's tumblers, turned with a shriek of tormented metal, showering the floorboards with rust motes. No ladder awaited. Peering into the squared void above revealed only an impenetrable dark. I wrestled the aluminium stepladder from the truck bed, the ascent into the attic, a clumsy, straining affair. My torch beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating the expected chaos, spectral furniture shrouded in white, cans of cardboard boxes, steamer trunks huddled against the eaves, and there, starkly positioned in the floor's dead center, sat a substantial wooden chest, perhaps 3 feet in length, banded with oxidizing iron. Its dark timber bore none of the ubiquitous dust. Its surface was disturbingly clean, as though recently tended. Another brass padlock, twin to the first, secured its secrets. The key slid home, turning smoothly this time. Lifting the heavy lid unleashed a cascade of photographs, hundreds, loose and disarrayed, monochrome ghosts on yellowing cardstock. They all bore witness to the same subject: a lanky, dark-haired man, his gaze perpetually solemn. Declan, undeniably, but decades younger than the vague memory I held. The images charted years. His hair deepened. His face grew etched with time. Faint gray feathered his temples. Yet 2 elements remained immutable. Declan stood perpetually solitary and perpetually observed. A presence lingered in the periphery of every frame. Initially, it eluded me. Examining a shot of Declan in the farmhouse kitchen, my focus snagged on his younger features. Only as I moved to discard it did my eye catch the form lurking in the shadowed doorway behind him. A tenebrous outline, man-shaped, man-sized, yet indistinct. The emulsion there seemed warped, fogged, as though heat-damaged or captured by an unsteady hand. But a head seemed undeniably turned towards Declan's unguarded back. A clammy unease slicked my palms as I sifted deeper. Declan in the stony garden, wrestling potatoes from the earth, a deeper shadow clinging to the dry stone wall behind. Declan ensconced in his reading chair, the identical blurred watcher framed by the window pane. Declan trudging the lane for the post, and there, nestled amongst the skeletal trees, that now familiar silhouette, always angled towards him, always attending. The photos offered no dates, only the silent chronicle of changing seasons, trees leafing and shedding, drifts of snow, bursts of ephemeral bloom, and through it all, the watcher persisted, sometimes nearer, sometimes distant, but ever present, ever vigilant. My hands quivered as I reached the chest's depths. The final photograph depicted Declan at this very desk, the one that yielded the key. He appeared older here, nearer the man of my scant recollections. The figure occupied a corner of the room, and though characteristically blurred, it seemed undeniably, chillingly closer than in any prior image. I thrust the photographs back, a chaotic jumble, slamming the lid shut. The sound reverberated, shrinking the attic's confines around me, thickening the air. I scrambled down the ladder, hauling it after me, fumbling the trapdoor closed. My tremor was so violent, locking the padlock became a desperate struggle. That night, sleep was a shore I couldn't reach. As I lay rigid in the unfamiliar bed, the house offered its usual chorus, the groan of timbers settling, the wind's mournful sigh in the eaves. I tried rationalizing the photographs away. Artistic experiments, flaws in outdated film, pareidolia born of stress and isolation. Then came the other sound, not the house settling, but something settling in. Footsteps, directly overhead, from the sealed attic. Slow, measured, rhythmic treads, pacing the length of the space above my ceiling. Back and forth, back and forth. Impossible. The trapdoor remained secured. I'd checked it myself earlier, the stepladder resting innocuously against the study wall downstairs. Later, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I shone my torch upwards. The padlock gleamed, undisturbed. Yet the footsteps persisted, dislodging faint dust motes that drifted down through the torch beam. Something moved in the void, pacing a locked, inaccessible space. Sleep became a forgotten country for 2 nights. The footfalls returned with the darkness, a relentless metronome, counting down. To what? On the 3rd day, desperate for understanding, I attacked Declan's remaining papers. Drawers disgorged the ephemera of a solitary life. Receipts, correspondence, farm ledgers filled with his spidery script. Mundane debris, mostly. Until, buried beneath yellowed newspapers in the lowest drawer, I unearthed a journal bound in worn leather. The first entry, dated 1975. It watches again, everywhere now, dismissed it as shadow play, tricks of the eye, but the photographs are irrefutable. There, in everyone. Closer now, its purpose remains opaque. Why me? Its patience is abyssal, watching, waiting. Never a sound, never movement when faced directly. Only watching, always. Years unfolded across the pages, chronicling Declan's frantic evasions, journeys to Dublin, London, even a 6-month flight to America, futile odysseys. It shadowed him relentlessly. The entries frayed into desperation. The final one, penned mere weeks before his death. It's inside, within the house. I hear it traversing the attic at night, seeking ingress. The trapdoor is bolted, but such barriers are temporary. It will not be deterred. So near now. Reflections betray it, standing just behind, over my shoulder. Always that indistinctness, that blur, but sharpening daily. Soon its face will resolve. God preserve me. I do not wish to see its face. Tucked beside the journal lay Declan's death certificate. Cause, cardiac arrest. Discovered slumped over this very desk. The official report noted an expression of profound terror etched onto his features. The pacing overhead has intensified, grown bolder. No longer confined to the shroud of night, the slow, deliberate footfalls echo in broad daylight now. Sometimes, a dry scraping sound accompanies them, like fingernails testing the plaster ceiling. Yesterday, in a moment of morbid curiosity, I aimed my phone's camera over my shoulder, snapped a picture, deleted it instantly. The image burned onto my retina, that familiar smudged silhouette hovering just behind me. Mirrors have become treacherous landscapes. Peripheral flickers suggest movement just beyond sight, something retreating as I turn. The photographs remain entombed in their chest, sequestered in the attic. A morbid impulse urges me to retrieve them, to scrutinize them for some overlooked clue, some hint of this thing's nature or desire. But the thought of unlatching that trapdoor again, knowing what walks above, paralysis holds me fast. Something resides up there, pacing its confines, drawing nearer with every step. I commit this to paper because the silence needs breaking, because someone must bear witness. Tomorrow, I abandon this place, sell it, burn it, whatever it takes to put distance between myself and this island. Perhaps its tether is to the house, not the bloodline. Perhaps fortune will favor me where it abandoned Declan. Yet last night, amidst the melancholy chore of packing, My reflection swam into view on the dark pane of the bedroom window. For one heart-stopping second, the image was utterly, terrifyingly sharp. The watcher behind me was no longer a blur. I saw its face, each feature distinct. It was smiling. Now, the car eats the miles southward, towards Dublin's distant lights, but the rearview mirror offers no escape. A flicker in the back seat. A presence, indistinct, a smudge in the periphery. For now, Declan's bequest is suddenly, horribly clear. This wasn't an inheritance of property. It was a transference. The footsteps haven't ceased. They've simply found a new host.